The uniqueness of God is this, that when He is massively offended, He still comes to the offenders and, warning them of the judgment to come, offers them forgiveness. It is that God who is hanging on the cross.
The march to Golgotha, the nails in His feet and hands, the spear in His side, sobering, brutal truths about the suffering that Jesus endured. Yet for most of those who witnessed that crucifixion, Jesus' death was more of a comedy than a tragedy. Now, you may be stunned, and rightly so, as you look at this comedy at Calvary. This lesson today is a part of John Macarthur's study on Grace to You that's helping you understand the enormity of the crucifixion. Stay tuned now as John begins the series from the Gospel of Luke. It's titled The Crucifixion Chronicle. Even if you're familiar with what happened at Calvary, you'll find fresh insight that will enhance your worship as Resurrection Sunday approaches. And now here's John Macarthur with that lesson.
From the viewpoint of the crucifiers of Jesus, the whole event had been twisted into a perverted and extended joke. Truly it was, in their view, a comedy, and Jesus was the butt of the joke. What was the joke? This is the King of the Jews. Laughable to them. The execution of Jesus is designed to be one big laugh. Comic satire. This is a king. Luke says very few words about the crucifixion. Very few. But says many words about the attitude of the people who were there. Let's listen to what Luke writes, starting in verse 33 of Luke 23. And when they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified Him and the criminals, one on the right and the other on the left. But Jesus was saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they cast lots, dividing up His garments among themselves. And the people stood by looking on. And even the rulers were sneering at Him, saying, He saved others. Let Him save Himself, if this is the Christ of God, His chosen one. And the soldiers also mocked Him, coming up to Him, offering Him sour wine, and saying, Since you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. Now there was also an inscription above Him, This is the King of the Jews. And one of the criminals who were hanged there was hurling abuse at Him, saying, You are the Christ, aren't you? Save yourself and us. It was sheer insanity to the murderers of Jesus to consider Him any different than others who were crucified. And the idea that Jesus claimed to be God's anointed King and Messiah was just laughable, so bizarre, so ludicrous, and so ridiculous that they managed to turn the whole thing into a comic melodrama. For the moment, Jesus looks to be a prince of fools. How wrong an assessment that is. Back to verse 33. When they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified Him. That's the same phrase in all four Gospels. Very restrained. They means the Roman soldiers. You can see that in Mark 15, verses 16 and 24. It was the Roman soldiers who actually crucified Jesus. Before they crucified Him, according to Matthew 27:34, they gave Him wine to drink mingled with gall. What was this? Well, as cruel as they were, there was a little bit of human sensibility in them, so that they gave to the person who was to be crucified a mild sedative, perhaps not coming close to easing the agonies of crucifixion, but sedating them enough so they could get them nailed to the cross without a fight. They didn't need to sedate Jesus. And so, after tasting it, he was unwilling to drink. He would take it all with full senses. He didn't need to be sedated to get him nailed there. He would put his hands there and his feet there willingly. That's all we know. They crucified him, and he refused the sedative. But he wasn't crucified alone. Two criminals, some think co-conspirators with Barabbas, because Barabbas, though he was a murderer, was also an insurrectionist, and you don't lead an insurrection by yourself. And Barabbas had been released because it was the custom to release a prisoner at the Passover, and they wanted Barabbas and not Jesus, that perhaps these were two co-conspirators with Barabbas who were guilty of some elements of insurrection. They are referred to in the Scripture a couple of ways, criminals, and they're also called robbers, so we can't be sure. But all three of them are crucified in the same way. Back now to Luke 23, there they crucified him and the criminals. I think sometimes we want to isolate Jesus out of that scene, but we can't do that. Whatever Jesus experienced, they experienced too. All three of them got the exact same treatment. All three are crucified in the exact same way, as thousands of others before them and after them would be. And I know when you read, there they crucified him, you wish you knew more. And you have a right to know more. Look, they understood when they read this in its original because they were experiencing the reality of crucifixion right on into the 4th century AD. So maybe a little bit of a summary just so you understand what was going on. But what I want you to keep in mind is this was being done to 3 people, not 1. And it had been done to thousands and thousands of others before and would be after. Through the years, there has been a lot of study of this. There have been a lot of interested people who have looked at the crucifixion of Christ from the historical, biblical, and even pathological viewpoint, bringing to bear upon it everything we can out of history of other crucifixions and forms of torture, and even in the more modern world, looking at it from a medical viewpoint. Perhaps the most concise and helpful treatment appeared in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, which is a prestigious journal, as you know. And this particular study of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ was done by the Department of Pathology at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota.